I took perverse pleasure in the fact that I could rile her up so much. "Alex," Josh prompted. "I don't know, man." I dragged my eyes away from Ava and her purple dress. "I'm not much of babysitter." "God think she's not a baby," he quipped. "Look, I know this a big ask, but you're the only person I trust not to, you know. Fuck her?" "Jesus, dude." Josh looked like he swallowed a lemon. "Don't use that word in relation to my sister. It's gross, but yeah. I mean, we both know she's not your type, and even if she was, you never go there." A silver of guilt flashed through me when I remember my errant fantasy a few moments ago. It was time for me to call up someone from my roster if I was fantasizing about Ava Chan, of all people. "But it's more than that," Josh continued. "You're the only person I trust, period, outside of my family. And you know how worried I'm about Ava, especially considering the whole thing with her ex." His face darkened. "I swear, if I ever see the fucker." I sighed. "I'd take care of her, don't worry." I was going to regret this. I knew it. Yet here I was, signing my life away at least for the next year. I didn't make a lot of promises, but when I did, I kept them. Committed myself to them, which meant if I promised Josh look after Ava, I'd fucking look after her. And I'm not talking about that text check into every 2 weeks. She was under my protection now. A familiar creeping sense of doom slithered around my neck and squeezed tighter and tighter, until oxygen ran scarce and tiny lights danced before my eyes. Blood everywhere, on my hands, on my clothes, splattered over the cream rug she loved so much, the one she brought back from Europe on her last trip abroad. And in an urge to scrub the rug and tear those bloody particles out of the soft wool fibers, one by one, gripped me, but I couldn't move. And I could do was stand and stare at the grotesque scene in my living room, a room which not half an hour earlier had burst with the warmth and laughter and love. Now it was cold and lifeless, like the three bodies at my feet. I blinked, and they disappeared, the lights, the memories, the noose around my neck. But they'd come back, they always did. "You're the best," Josh was saying, his grin back now that I'd agree to take on a role I had no business taking. I wasn't a protector, I was a destroyer. I broke hearts, crushed business opponents, and didn't care about the aftermath. If someone was stupid enough to fall for me or across me, two things I warned people never, ever to do, they had it coming. "I'll bring you back. Fuck, I don't know. Coffee, chocolate, pounds of water, whatever is good down there. And I owe you a big, fat favor in the future." I forced a smile. Before I could respond, my phone rang, and I held up a finger. "Be right back. I have to take this." "Take your time, man." Josh was already distracted by the blonde and brunette who'd be an all-over-me earlier, and who found a much more willing audience in my best friend. By the time I stepped into backyard and answered my call, they had held hands beneath his t-shirt. I said, using the Ukrainian term for uncle. "Alex." My uncle's voice rasped over the line, scratchy from decades of cigarettes and the wear and tear of life. I hope I'm not interpreting. No. I glanced through the sliding glass door and the reveille inside. Josh had lived in the same rambling, two-story house of Tyres campus since undergrad. We'd roomed together until I graduated and moved to DC proper, to be closer to my office, and to get away from the hordes of shrieking, drunken college students that paraded through campus and the surrounding neighbors every night. Everyone had turned out for Josh farewell party, and by everyone, I mean half the population of Hazelburg, Maryland, where the tire was located. He was a town favorite, and I imagine people would miss his parties as much as they missed his job himself. For someone who always claimed to be drawing in schoolwork, he found a lot of time for drinking and sex. Not that it hurt his academic performance. The bastard had a 40.0 GPA. Did you take care of the problem? My uncle asked. I had a drawer open and close, followed by the faint click of a lighter. I'd urged him to quit smoking countless times, but he always brushed me off. Old habits die hard. Old bad habits even more so, and Ivan Volkov had reached the age where he couldn't be bothered. Not yet. The moon hung low in the sky, casting ribbons of light that snacked through the otherwise inky darkness of the backyard. Light and shadow, two halves of the same coin. I will were close. To justice, Venegas, salvation. For 16 years the pursuit of those three things had consumed me. They were my every walking foot, my every dream and nightmare, my reason for living, even in a situation where I'd been distracted by something else. The chess play of corporate politics, the fleeting pleasure of burying myself into the tight, warm heat of a walling body. They lurked in my consciousness, driving me to greater heights of ambition and ruthlessness. 16 years might seem like a long time, but I specialize in the long game. It doesn't matter how many years I have to wait as long as the end is worth it. And the end of the man who had destroyed my family? It would be glorious. Good. My uncle coughed and my lips pinched. One of these days, I convinced him to quit smoking. Lift had driven and sentimentally out of me years ago, but Evans was my only living relative. He took me in, raised me as his own, and stuck by through every thorny twist of my path toward revenge, so I owed him that much at least. Your family will be at peace soon, he said. Perhaps. Whether the same could be said of me, well, that was a question for another day. There's a board meeting next week, I said, switching topics. I'll be in town for the day. My uncle was the official CEO of Archer Group, the real estate development company he founded a decade ago with my guardians. I had a knack for my business even as a teenager. Archer Group headquarters called Philadelphia home, but it had office across the country. Since I was based in DC, that was the company's real power center. Full board meetings still took place at HQ. I could even took over as CEO years ago, per my uncle's and my agreement when he started the company, but the CEO position offered me more flexibility until I finished what I had to do. Besides, everyone knew I was the power behind the throne, anyway. Ivan was a decent CEO, but it was my strategies that had catapulted into the Fortune 500 after a mere decade. My uncle and I talked business for a while longer before I hung up and rejoined the party. The gears in my head crunkled into motion as I took stock of evening's developments. My promise to Josh, my uncle's nudge about the minor hiccup in my revenge plan. Somehow, I had to chronicle the two over the next year. I mentally arranged the piece of my life into different patterns, playing each scenario out to the end, weighing the pros and cons, and examining them for potential cracks until I reached a decision. Everything good? Josh called out from the couch, where the blonde kissed his neck while the brunette's hands became intimately acquainted with the region below his belt. Yes, to my irritation, my gaze strayed toward Ava again. She was in the kitchen, fusing over the half-eaten cake from Crumble and Bake. Her tanned skin glowed with a faint sheen of sweat from dancing, and her raven hair billowed around her face in a soft cloud. About your earlier request, I have an idea.